Hey guys, welcome to day 96 of the Bible in a Year plan. Today we will be reading 2 Samuel 6, 1 Chronicles 13, Acts 23, and Psalm 60. If you need to read more about this plan, visit the High Quality Gospel website with the link in the description of the episode and the podcast. Please leave a like and follow the podcast to stay up to date with new episodes. Now, let's begin with reading 2 Samuel 6. David again assembled all the fit young men in Israel, 30,000. He and all the troops set out to bring the ark of God from Baal, Judah. The ark bears the name of the Lord of armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They set the ark of God on a new cart and transported it from Abinadab's house, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the cart, and brought it with the ark of God from Abinadab's house on the hill. Ahio walked in front of the ark. David and the whole house of Israel were dancing before the Lord with all kinds of fir wood instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah reached out to the ark of God and took hold of it because the oxen had stumbled. Then the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, and God struck him dead on the spot for his irreverence, and he died there next to the ark of God. David was angry because the Lord's outburst against Uzzah, so he named that place Outburst Against Uzzah, as it is today. David feared the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" So he was not willing to bring the ark of the Lord to the city of David. Instead, he diverted it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of the Lord remained in his house 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his whole family. It was reported to King David, "The Lord has blessed Obed-Edom's family and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God." So David went and had the ark of God brought up from Obed-Edom's house to the city of David with rejoicing. When those carrying the ark of the Lord advanced 6 steps, he sacrificed an ox and fattened a calf. David was dancing with all his might before the Lord, wearing a linen ephod. He and the whole house of Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of the trumpet. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Saul's daughter Michal looked down from the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent David had pitched for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings in the Lord's presence. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of armies. Then he distributed a loaf of bread, a date cake, and a raisin cake to each one in the entire Israelite community, both men and women. Then all the people went home. Then when David returned home to bless his household, Saul's daughter Michal came out to meet him. "How the king of Israel honored himself today," she said. "He exposed himself today in the sight of the slave girls of his subjects like a vulgar person would expose himself." David replied to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me over your father and his whole family to appoint me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will dance before the Lord, and I will dishonor myself and humble myself even more. However, by the slave girls you spoke about, I will be honored." And Saul's daughter Michal had no child to the day of her death. Now we read 1 Chronicles 13. David consulted all his leaders, the commanders of hundreds and of thousands. Then he said to the whole assembly of Israel, "If it seems good to you, and if this is from the Lord our God, let's spread out and send the message to the rest of our relatives in all the districts of Israel, including the priests and the Levites in their cities with pasture lands, that they should gather together with us. Then let's bring the ark of our God, for we did not inquire of him in Saul's days." Since the proposal seemed right to all the people, the whole assembly agreed to it. So David assembled all Israel from the Shihor of Egypt to the entrance of Hamath, to bring the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. David and all Israel went to Baalah, that is Kiriath Jearim, that belongs to Judah, to take there from the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord who is enthroned between the cherubim. At Abinadab's house they set the ark of God on a new cart. Uzzah and Ahio were guiding the cart. David and all Israel were dancing with all their might before God, with songs and lyres, harps, tambourines, cymbals, and trumpets. When they came to Chidon's threshing floor, Uzzah reached out to hold the ark because the oxen had stumbled. Then the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, and he struck him dead because he had reached out to the ark. So he died there in the presence of God. David was angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah, so he named that place Outburst Against Uzzah, as it is named today. David feared God that day and said, "How can I ever bring the ark of God to me?" So David did not bring the ark of God home to the city of David. Instead, he diverted it to the house of Obed-Edom in Gath. The ark of God remained with Obed-Edom's family in his house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed his family and all he had. Now we read Acts 23. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, "Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience to this day." The high priest Ananias ordered those who were standing next to him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. You were sitting there judging me according to the law, and yet in violation of the law are you ordering me to be struck?" Those standing nearby said, "Do you dare revile God's high priest?" "I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest," replied Paul, "for it is written, 'You must not speak evil of a ruler of your people.'" When Paul realized that one of them were Sadducees and the other part were Pharisees, he cried out in the Sanhedrin, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am being judged because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, and neither angel nor spirit, but the Pharisees affirm them all. The shouting grew loud, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party got up and argued vehemently. "We find nothing evil in this man. What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" When this dispute became violent, the commander feared that Paul might be torn apart by them and ordered the troops to go down, take him away from them, and bring him to the barracks. The following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Have courage, for as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so it is necessary for you to testify in Rome." When it was morning, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves under a curse not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who had formed this plot. These men went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a solemn curse that we won't eat anything until we have killed Paul. So now you, along with the Sanhedrin, make a request to the commander that he bring him down to you, as if you are going to investigate his case more thoroughly. But before he gets near, we are ready to kill him." But the son of Paul's sister, hearing about their ambush, came and entered the barracks and reported it to Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander, because he has something to report him." So he took him, brought him to the commander, and said, "The prisoner Paul called me and asked me to bring this young man to you, because he has something to tell you." The commander took him by the hand, led him aside, and inquired privately, "What is it you have to report to me?" "The Jews," he said, "have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the Sanhedrin tomorrow, as though they are going to hold a somewhat more careful inquiry about him. Don't let them persuade you, because there are more than 40 of them lying in ambush, men who have bound themselves under a curse not to eat or drink until they have killed him. Now they are ready, waiting for your consent." So the commander dismissed the young man and instructed him, "Don't tell anyone that you have informed me about this." He summoned 2 of his centurions and said, "Get 200 soldiers ready with 70 cavalry and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Also provide mounts to ride so that Paul may be brought safely to Felix the governor." He wrote the following letter: "Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. When this man had been seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them, I arrived with my troops and rescued him because I learned that he is a Roman citizen. Wanting to know the charge they were accusing him of, I brought him down before the Sanhedrin. I found out the accusations were concerning questions of their law, and that there was no charge that merited death or imprisonment. When I was informed that there was a plot against the man, I sent him to you right away. I also ordered his accusers to state their case against him in your presence." So the soldiers took Paul during the night and brought him to Antipatris, and they were ordered. The next day they returned to the barracks, following the cavalry, to go with him. When these men entered Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. After he read it, he asked what province he was from. When he learned he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will give you a hearing whenever your accusers also get here." He ordered that to be kept under guard in Herod's place. Now we read Psalm 60. God, you have rejected us and have broken us down. You have been angry, restore us. You have shaken the land and split it open. Heal its fissures, for it shudders. You have made your people suffer hardship. You have given us wine to drink. That made us stagger. You have given a signal flag to those who fear you, so that they can flee before the archers. Save with your right hand and answer me, so that those you love may be rescued. God has spoken in his sanctuary. I will celebrate, I will divide up Shechem. I will apportion the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine, and Ephraim is my helmet. Judah is my scepter. Moab is my wash basin. I throw my sandal on Edom. I shout in triumph over Philistia. Who will bring me to the fortified city? Who will lead me to Edom? God, haven't you rejected us? God, you do not march out with your armies. Give us aid against the foe, for human help is worthless. With God we will perform valiantly. He will trample our foes. On day 95, we read of David and the civil war in Israel, and in Acts, Paul speaks to the people who won't listen. Today in 2 Samuel, we see two attempts to move the ark to a different location. Now, there is no law determining where the ark is supposed to be, so it can be placed anywhere. But remember, there are many laws about how it should be treated. We read of the different laws of the tabernacle, what it should look like, how the people should act, and how it represents holiness. So what David did was wrong the first time. When we read, we see that the ark was not being cared for properly. Only the high priest can touch the ark on the Day of Atonement. It should be carried by poles, not by cart. It is stated that they followed the Philistine method of carrying it. Well, they paid for it, and Uzzah was killed for touching the ark, even to keep it upright. If it was not on a cart, but instead being carried the proper way, it wouldn't have needed somebody to touch it and keep it upright, because there would have been priests who carried it by the poles. David, in the end, is ultimately to blame for this. Good intentions mean nothing. God determines how we worship and what is holy. Saul believed his good intentions would be enough to sacrifice to God, and the kingship was taken from him. David believed that moving the ark in his own way was good enough, but Uzzah paid the price. Now later they tried it again and arrived in Jerusalem, where David danced and worshipped God. And so how did they get to Jerusalem? They did it the proper way. Took a little while to figure it out, but they did it the proper way. And so God allowed the ark to be in Jerusalem. And so with this worship, there was nothing wrong with the worship, but it was definitely not dignifying, at least not to human eyes. To his wife, he made a fool of himself, and he embarrassed himself and his family, a royal family. She says that his dancing was not worthy of a king to do, apparently. But as long as David was not overly vulgar, why should he worry about if his worship doesn't look kingly? We must humble ourselves before God, and David acknowledges this and says that he will continue to humble himself in worship. Worship is all about humbling yourself and glorifying God instead, in our place. Worrying about how we look to people is not even close to important when it comes to worship. And when we do care, we're putting our pride over God. We must humble ourselves when we come to God. In Acts, Paul addresses the Sanhedrin, but he has broken no laws. He speaks of the resurrection of the dead, which was a common debate at the time, and this caused an intense argument for the Sanhedrin. This angered them so heavily that they created a plot to kill him. But God is with Paul through this whole scenario. Christ lets us know the mission, to go to Rome. That's the end goal. This begins the journey to Rome, and God has given Paul the pathway. He is taken into custody by Romans, who see the danger against Paul and protect Paul. He is sent under guard to Felix, who will hear the arguments in Paul's favor and against him. Paul is now in the custody of the Gentiles, which, believe it or not, is safer than with the Jews at this time. But this passage sets up what we will be reading until the end of Acts, Paul's journey to Rome. Now, he has always desired to go to Rome because that's the center of the world at this time. Why not spread the gospel in the center of the world? And so he's always desired this, and now God is formulating the plan that gets him there. But none of this would have been possible without God's intervention and God's plans. In Psalm, David writes a prayer asking God for help in the troubling times. Surprisingly, David praises God through this prayer. He ultimately trusts God. And yes, it will seem like we can't trust God when we go through different things, but we must praise and trust Him. We know He is unchanging, holy, and faithful. We have the evidence of that written in a book before us. So even if you feel like you can't trust God, or it feels like God has left you, pray a prayer like this and ask God for help, for only He can help. Thank you for joining in the reading and understanding of these chapters, and let us all be vigilant in continuing this reading. Please share, like, follow, or whatever you can do to help us reach more people with the Bible reading. Please also check out the High Quality Gospel website for more information and a couple of store items. Thank you, and keep learning.